Last time on the WizardCast.
From Made Up Studios in the cloud, it's the WizardCast with Brian Kwong. Tonight, an exciting announcement about new Salesforce products featuring the Wizard Staff Band. And here's your hostess with the mostest magic, Brian Kwong.
Yeah, thank you very much. Everybody, sit down. No, thank you. We got a really great show for you tonight. It's a great lineup. We're going to start with jokes right over there.
Like we do.
Yep, like we do. And then we'll dive into a very exciting announcement from Salesforce. And of course, it's our 2019 IdeaExchange highlight.
Oh,
Very exciting times, right, Mark?
Brian, I can't help but think we might be running out of ideas.
Running out of our ears? Yes?
No. I mean, last episode we started like a radio show, and this time, it's a late night show, but it's still really similar.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm opening the show, Mark, like we do every episode. I'm sharing what we're going to do on the show with all these fine people. That's right. I'm looking at you, sir. Great show tonight. Great.
Okay, folks, I think Brian is actually losing his mind. There's not actually anyone here, and all these different show openings are almost kind of like multiple personalities. I'm starting to wonder.
Oh, my.
Yeah?
Here's Johnny.
Yeah.
And now the conclusion of the WizardCast.
I'm Brian Kwong.
And I'm Mark Ross.
We're Salesforce experts that love talking about technology and Salesforce.
We also love humor. Doesn't mean we're actually good at it.
In the Salesforce community, I'm known as the Salesforce Wizard, likely due to me wearing a wizard hat at Salesforce events.
And I'm known as Salesforce Yoda for pretty much the same reason.
You should see the ears.
We have a passion to help educate and entertain people.
So we've joined forces to create WizardCast.
We've got tips and best practices.
We talk with interesting people.
All mixed with quote-unquote jokes and humor.
Welcome
to
the
the
WizardCast.
Hey, Brian, did you hear the one about the chicken? Did you hear this one? Did you hear the one about the chicken? He went into stand-up comedy. Did you hear that one, Brian?
I did not, sir.
During her first show, she really laid an egg.
Hi-yo!
Huh? All right, enough of that.
Well, we do have a really exciting announcement from Salesforce this episode.
That's right. Get excited. Exclusive announcement right here.
By the time this episode aired, most of you have already heard of it, because on the first Monday of April this month, Salesforce announced that for the first time, it'll be releasing a brand new product.
That's right. Is it a new cloud, Brian?
Close. It's Salesforce brand cheese.
Yeah. Cheese? I didn't hear this. I didn't see this.
Yeah, the announcement has already created quite a lot of buzz on Twitter, with users tweeting up their favorite flavors and names. Pat Solemn, also known as SodaForce, is excited for Cloud Curds, which is a white cheese flavored with bacon and jalapenos.
Jalapenos. Let me see this here. Okay. Yeah. So someone on Twitter, Jorge, goes by Salesforce GQ. He's thrilled for a number of flavors, including Ohana Onion, Apex American, Cheddar, Benioff Blue. He goes on a long ways here.
Yep. Now, my favorites are, of course, Admin Asiago and Mike Gudaholt. Oh, can't forget Baby Bell Baseman or Jillian Gorgonzola. What about you, Mark?
Looking at the list, this one's good. I like this. Just wacky enough to sound nearly unpalatable. MuleSoft Mozzarella. Yeah. The thing is, Brian, I like cheese, but I can't. I'm lactose intolerant.
Mark, I'm surprised at you. This is 2019. I think it's time for you to put your bigotry aside and realize that cheese is food too. You can't be intolerant of it.
No, Brian, it's not that. It's.
Are you a bigot, Mark?
What? No. I'm trying to explain. There are certain foods I just can't eat. My system doesn't like them, and it would cause all sorts of trouble. I
You're
can't.
discriminating against Cheesemark. I mean, shame on you. You will give this delightful treat the same respect you will give any lactose-free food. Eat it.
But
Eat it.
ugh. Ugh.
You know what would have been great for this segment, Mark?
What's that? An intro that we wrote into the script?
A segue into the actual content.
That's why I just played music just now.
That was great.
Didn't have to come up with one. Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
I picked it out myself.
So welcome. It is 2019, and it's time for the Idea Exchange highlight. Okay. Yeah.
Holla? I thought you said holla there for a second.
No,
Holla.
highlight.
Highlight
So,
holla.
For newer listeners who have not been hearing this, about once or twice a year, we do an Idea Exchange highlight where we take ideas off of the Idea Exchange, typically submitted by our listeners. So if you have something that you want us to talk about in the next one, feel free to submit it. We'll talk about a link down at the end of the show. But we talk about them, about what we think about them, why this might be important to people or not be important. And sometimes we agree with them and sometimes we don't. So, Mark, what's our first idea on our list?
Our first idea on the list is actually one I came up with because what? We get
self-promotion.
This isn't self-promotion. It's not an idea I made. There's a distinction.
Right there. You had someone make it out for you. That's cronyism.
Wow, you're just painting me with all sorts of broad strokes today. So no, this is one that, as an admin, for many years has given me lots of pain and difficulty. And that is the fact that you cannot make triggers on the account team member object. And so this idea is specifically just for that, which essentially means that if you want to use account teams, you have to be willing for it to be a very standalone sort of thing. There's no workflow at all that can trigger off of a account team member change or creation. No triggers whatsoever.
Right. I mean, you can write Apex to create account teams, but if someone manually added one through the standard UI, you couldn't then use that as the action to go do other things.
Right. And this idea has been on the Idea Exchange for 8 years.
8 years.
At one time, Salesforce specifically said, yeah, we're never going to do this. Thankfully, lately, like 4 months ago, somebody posted saying, yes, we are reviewing this for roadmap. So all the more reason to start, going to this link. And guess what? The links are in the show notes.
We're going to make you read the show notes. Yeah, I mean,
you're going to have to.
It's not just account teams. I mean, think about it. You have the same thing with opportunity teams and other objects that are like that are not what they call class 1 objects, right? You can't do anything and everything with them like you could with a custom object. But account teams is a big one because it handles a lot of things regarding sharing and not being able to do something along the lines of that, hey, someone added an account team, we need to go send an email alert to let the account owner know, or stuff like that. Really problematic to a lot of organizations.
Yeah. And this is something that I know is of interest to people because although this was created 8 years ago, there are comments throughout the entire life cycle of this, including one that was made 1 day ago asking when will this feature be implemented. So clearly it is still on people's minds.
Yeah. All right. Our next idea was submitted by our listener, Jen Lee.
Listener, that sounds familiar. Maybe, wasn't she also a guest?
Yeah, like last episode.
Oh, yeah, last episode. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But she listens. I'm assuming she listens, right, Jen?
We'll find out.
I know where you work.
Reply.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, if you know Jen and she doesn't listen, no fear. That's cheating to tell her. Okay. Anyways, she submitted a request, an idea that wasn't something that she put in. It was put in by Julia Stewart about a year ago, and that's to reorder immediate actions in Process Builder.
Yes.
Now,
please.
I can understand the desire to reorder things, but wouldn't that really only make a difference if the order makes a difference to how they get processed? Because right now there is no order of operations based off of the order that the actions are listed.
Rather, there's no automatic. It's not consistent, is what you're saying.
Right. There's no way to say, hey, if I have these 3 actions and they're ordered 1, 2, 3, they may not necessarily get fired and completed in that order that they're listed. They could be in any given order that Salesforce has put in.
I'm not entirely certain I understood that as a requirement.
I mean,
or as a thing. I'm not sure I ever encountered that personally. That things would happen out of the order I created them in.
Yeah, I mean, they work that way in other things that Salesforce does, like part completion actions.
Sure.
Right? And things like that. And I can tell logically when people look at it, that's what their expectation is. But when you consider that, hey, if you're making an update to the record that's handling it, right, you may be making the update to multiple fields, and you don't want to have the update happen, and then the next action be update happen, and then the next action be update happening to the same record multiple times.
Right. Well, and Flow doesn't like doing that anyway, right?
Right.
It tends to bottom out. It tends to error out when you set that sort of thing up to edit the same record more than once. But yeah, it's still an important thing. So 1, for the sake of organization,
right,
and 2, for maybe this idea should be a bit more encompassing in that it is not just changing how the actions look in Process Builder, but also actually incorporating some amount of consistency in the order of operations.
Right. I mean, from my standpoint, the order of operation comes in really handy if you have the situation of you are going to make an update to the record, and based on that update may trigger other things that need to get evaluated. So like if you can imagine you have a 5 criteria process, the first criteria fires and does some actions, which would make one of the criteria below it evaluate to be true as well. But Process Builder doesn't work that way.
Well,
right?
it can do that if you tell it to
It's got to be
rerun.
recursive.
It's got to be recursive.
It has to
tell it that
rerun
at the very beginning.
It's not running within that one first review of the process. You have to purposely have recursion turn on.
Yeah. And just now I am looking in the IdeaExchange to see if I can see anything regarding the order of things happening. I don't see that as an idea currently. I do see an interesting idea here, though, for reusing actions.
Which I would love more than anything else.
Yeah, I think that was made by Brian Kwong. Have you heard of him? I think he's a listener.
I hear he's a really smart guy.
Okay.
And he listens to every episode at least once.
Hi-oh.
But
yeah, because I make you listen to it to be sure that the edit came out.
You don't make me do anything. I listen to it because I don't trust your edits. So I put it in there because you think like workflow rules, right? With field updates and email alerts, those are all separate actions that you could reuse across multiple rules. And there's been lots of different times where I've had a series of criteria that are going to perform some or if not all of the same actions. But maybe with something a little different, like, hey, I'm going to call the same flow multiple times. But the input's going to be slightly different. I would love to be able to clone an action to use it someplace else.
Now,
if I couldn't outright just have one action to send the same email alert.
Now, couldn't you just make a process that gets then called by other processes?
Sure, but that's so much work and effort. Why would I want to do that?
Because it's exactly what you're wanting to do.
No, it's not.
Okay, all right.
I mean, think about it.
Moving on.
I could do that, but then I'm going to have to create a process for like every single individual action.
Oh, I see what you're saying. If you're getting to that level of granularity, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sure. Well, there is a limit on processes.
Oh, there's a limit on process, and there's usage-based entitlements now, which is a whole different conversation.
Oh, don't.
We'll talk about that later. Hopefully we'll talk with someone who actually can talk to us about it.
Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah, I thought you mentioned me and you because
no, because that would not be a pretty discussion for either of us.
No.
But Mr.org, how about you take the next idea?
Oh, indeed, this one is one that is actually .org related, and bear with me. I'm going to say the name of this first, and then I will explain it. This is. Add Sprinty the T-Rex as a Salesforce mascot. That is the name of the idea.
Which
encourage
makes
everybody.
No sense.
No, it doesn't, unless you happen to know.
I mean, have you seen T-Rexes? They're not exactly sprinty.
Well, That's the thing. Are you familiar with the various forms of Halloween costume, which are essentially an inflatable T-Rex that somebody wears?
Oh, sure. They're really popular on YouTube. You can see them ice skating and mowing the
Right.
lawn or
and
snowballing
running.
the driveway
And it looks
or
hilarious when
scaring
they,
small little children.
yeah, and it looks hilarious when they run.
Yeah, they're kind of bobbing up and down.
Right. They sprint. And well, that's part of it. This is actually a thing that has to do with a subject that we covered in a recent episode about community sprints for .org. There is a mascot that shows up to most community sprints, not every community sprints. It is literally Salesforce.org employee Jace Bryan in the T-Rex costume.
There's two people in there?
No, Jace Bryan is his name.
So there's two people, Jace and Brian.
He has two first names, like me.
Gosh, it's so weird. We'll probably be talking to him in a future episode anyways.
But here's
we will inquire about the two first names at that time.
Okay. All right. So here's the thing. I'm gonna read at least some of this. Sprinting the T-Rex has been attending Salesforce and Salesforce.org functions since 2016, where messages of community equality, diversity, equity, and inclusivity are in full swing.
Which I have no idea what that has to do with the T-Rex.
Well, you know, why is Cody a bear? Why is Blaze a wolf?
It makes perfect sense.
T-Rex? Why not a T-Rex? Sprinty identifies as an underrepresented voice in technology and also considers himself, yes, Sprinty's pronouns are he, him, his, an ally and accomplice. He enjoys long walks in the forest.
Okay, that's enough, Mark. Come on.
There's lots of value in this, and it is quite popular. He is quite popular at the events. So.
And this was another listener who made the recommendation we talk about that, and that was Sarah P.
Yeah, and the idea was submitted by Joanna Iturbe, who's an MVP in the education space, I believe.
All right. So here's something that I'm sure doesn't bother anyone, and that's the email action does not relate the emails to related records and activity history in Lightning.
Okay, what?
Email action does not relate emails to related records, activities, history in Lightning.
You're going to have to explain that one.
Fine. So, you know, like in Classic, if you go and the contact is the default recipient, and then you can see that the email that got sent is tied to both the activity of the contact and the activity of the contact's account. Right? Doesn't happen. In Lightning,
wait, what?
Yeah. In Lightning, it sets the email address, and the sent email doesn't actually appear on the account or the contact's activity history.
That's something that if I were not an employee, I would be making very loud statements about, because that's really kind of
stupid. Incomplete.
Let's start with perhaps needs further iteration.
Perhaps it needs further. You know what they need to accomplish this? They need a T-Rex to help with their sprint.
Sure. I imagine they get right up to that desk. You know, they're probably really good at typing because they move those little arms so fast.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But they only have 3 claws of hands, so, you know, it's kind of henpecking. No.
This episode.
This is what we get for spending way too much time not recording. I'm getting silly.
So the interesting thing about this episode is it actually wasn't. The interesting thing about this item, this idea, it was not actually submitted to us. We found it in the recently made items.
It was 9 hours ago.
It says 10 now on my screen.
Well, that's because I haven't refreshed.
Right, exactly. So, you know, that is something that everybody should be doing, at least at some point. We know as admins it's hard to find time, but, you know, when you get a chance, go take a look at ideas in the Trailblazer community and, you know, change the filter from trending to recent and see what comes up, because there's some pretty interesting stuff and some pretty valuable stuff that really needs voting. And it's something we've talked about with, I think, Erica Cool. We actually talked about this when we interviewed her months ago about a way to surface up these recent items. So, yeah, I think we've got another one that is very similar to that. I'm going to skip down to that one, Brian.
Okay.
And this one is one that I discovered. It was made a day ago by Scott Berriman. And it says allow drop zones in custom components. And the thing is, like, both of these ideas we've discovered in recent. For all we know, there are existing ideas that these are copies of. We don't know.
I don't get it.
There's nothing. What?
I don't get it.
What do you mean you don't get it?
Just that, I don't get it.
Let me read it for you. It says custom components need the ability to drag and drop other components into them, similar to the way standard layout components operate. So are you familiar in Lightning, Brian, with the tab component?
No.
When's the last time you used Lightning, Brian?
Today.
When's the last time you designed a Lightning page, Brian?
Today.
And you didn't work with the tabs component?
No, I use accordion.
All right.
No,
that was going to
totally,
be my next question.
I'm totally messing with you.
Okay. we are really trigger happy today, aren't we?
It's the band. The band gets me so excited.
The band. Yeah. So yeah, that's
music.
what this is. Currently there is no way to develop without doing probably crazy amounts of JavaScript that there are no libraries for. There's no way to actually make a component that you can add to a custom component that you can add to a Lightning page that lets you put other components inside it. You have to use the ones that are provided. And I actually do know that this is the case, or at least it was as a while ago, because at my previous gig, our developer was trying to make this exact same thing and he couldn't do it.
Yeah, it's got to be something to do with the JavaScript containers.
Yeah, exactly. It may have something to do with security, JavaScript, there's potentially a lot of security holes, and Salesforce is very sensitive about that, as well they should be. So they're very protective, and maybe that's why. This is an idea. It's a great idea. I can see a lot of huge potential for this. It has 1 vote.
No, it doesn't.
And that means it's the guy who created it who submitted the vote, right? So
I'm voting, so it's going to have 2 votes.
Awesome. I haven't logged in. Otherwise, I would also do so. You know what? No, I'm just going to do it right now. Live logging in, folks. Doesn't get more intense than
username. There's the password. There's me putting in the information again because for some reason it didn't actually save my username properly.
Yeah, no, I had to do it twice because Dashlane didn't pick up the first time.
Yep.
And
upvote.
Upvoted, yes. Simultaneous upvoting. There you go. This is the experience you pay for, or rather don't pay for here on the WizardCast.
But you should totally pay for it. Visit our Patreon. No, I'm kidding.
No.
It's GoFundMe.
Go fund this.
GoFundCast. All right.
So we had one more that was kind of developer oriented, didn't we?
Yes. And that was from Daniel Ballinger.
Ballinger?
Ballinger?
I think it's Ballinger.
Ballinger? Didn't I say Ballinger?
You said Ballinger.
Whatever. Sorry, Daniel. Daniel's idea that he submitted was to add support for final variables in switch statement when clauses. And then he included this, at which point he said dry, don't repeat yourself, is a common principle of software development. This basically means define something once and then reference that from other places where it is needed. I.e., define a fixed string value once, then reference that value rather than defining it again and again. Sounds like a constant, maybe a global variable. As they currently are in Apex, switch statements don't support using string variables, so text. Instead, you need to repeat a literal string every time you want to switch on it. This is off-putting to many developers due to the aforementioned dry, D-R-Y principle. This idea will allow for string to be defined once and then referenced in switch statements. Now,
I mean, that seems like common sense to me.
It seems like common sense. I have no idea how I would use a switch statement because I'm not sure what a switch statement is.
Neither do I.
I mean, I do some Apex, but I don't think I've ever used a switch that I know of.
We both own Nintendo Switches. I'm aware of this.
We do.
Yes.
And it does not accept string variables either.
No.
I tried. I tried putting cheese string into my Switch, and it just didn't work. Didn't take it.
I think your Switch is lactose intolerant.
This intolerance is just intolerable. Moving on, let's talk about
one more
asynchronicity.
Yes, asynchronicity. This is submitted by Scott Divish 2 years ago. In fact, it's got 85 votes. Could use more. And it is running flows asynchronously. Now, if you don't know what asynchronous means, that is essentially...
It means not synchronously.
It means, all right. If you've heard of the @future call in Apex, it's similar to that. It's basically the idea of, I want you to run this as soon as possible, but it doesn't have to be right now. That's essentially what it means in the Salesforce context. So in other words, you could have some at future is the asynchronous, how you basically signify your Apex as being asynchronous.
Well, you're not supposed to use at future anymore. You should be using you should be using the queuable interface.
Holy cow, I'm behind. I mean, I never was great to begin with, but you get the point. So it's the idea that I want this to run, but I recognize that I'm going to hit limits, whether they're socket limits, CPU limits.
Or you just don't need it to run immediately upon whatever is triggering the call.
Right. So you can tell it just when you can, when your limits aren't up, go ahead and run this. Now, technically,
you can do that now.
You can do it now, right?
It's called a schedule action and process builder, or technically a wait node or pause node in Flow.
Right. And it used to be more difficult because you had to do a workaround. As of either the last release or the release before that.
Yeah, this most recent release.
Most recent one, you can set your scheduled action to wait 0, right? So in other words, you can tell it to do something as a scheduled action, which normally means in a certain amount of time, but you can tell it 0 hours. And that doesn't mean do it immediately like every other process would be. That what that means is do it when you can. The problem with that is Salesforce doesn't actually tell you that is, at least they're not very good at telling you that means asynchronous. They're not very good at telling you, hey, this will help you get around limits.
Well, that's because if you think about asynchronous, is dev speak. It's term that most developers will know because they're the ones that have been dealing with asynchronous calls for years.
But they're not telling you that it will help get around limits either. Like there's a certain amount of interface.
as a developer, they understand that concept. But for admins who are doing the declarative development, it's a new concept or newish concept.
Yeah, it needs to be evangelized more. It needs to be talked about more. Look, this is a real problem that you've had with your Flow development for years, and now we have a solution to it. And this is your solution, and this is how you do it. They're not really following that discourse, at least from what I can tell.
And to be safe, just because it can get you around limits doesn't mean you should do it. So
why shouldn't somebody do this?
So I'll give you an example of things that can cause funkiness. All right. Mm-hmm. Let's say you have a scheduled action to update the record that was triggered by the process.
Okay.
So you have an account, you edit the account, and then some unknown amount of time goes by after the transaction is completed, and that account gets updated.
It could be 5 minutes, right?
So that could do things like lock the record. So you could be doing a different edit, or someone could be doing a different edit, and then the system runs that asynchronous, that scheduled action to update the account. And that will effectively cause a record lock, and you get one of those errors that says this could not be saved because so and so was already editing the record.
So it'll be locked that whole time.
Well, no, it's not locked. It's locked because someone hit the system made the edit. So from the moment
they kick it off to the moment that the DML actually completes, that's locked the whole time.
No.
Okay.
So it goes. I edit the account.
Mm-hmm.
I hit save. The record is unlocked. Okay.
Okay.
Someone else goes in and hits the edit button and is like, type in a big description note. Why they're in that process.
Got it.
Your scheduled action then fires and does the DML to update the account again.
So it basically kicks them back out and says, we're sorry, please.
Yeah, that action basically makes the change to the account, therefore locks the record. And then when the person who is writing the long description tries to save, it will get an error message that says, hey, we couldn't do this because someone was editing.
Right. So it's not going to lock it in that it's not going to show like a little lock icon, No. It's not going to take away the edit button, but what it will mean is that anybody who goes and tries to do something will be hit with an error message. Will have to reload the page.
Right.
Which can be annoying,
which will be annoying, and so just don't do actions that end up updating the record that you're modifying.
Yeah.
At least asynchronously as a scheduled action. So there are other things that can be problematic with asynchronous, at least in code. That's one of the reasons why that queuable interface is out there now. You're not supposed to just use at future.
Mm-hmm.
And that's preventing things from overwriting itself. So in Apex, you can't have a future event call a future event. So you can't have something that says, hey, in the future, go make this change, which ends up calling some Apex call that also does an at future. That throws an error, right? Where queuable, it says, hey, go queue this change, and then if something else, it's just queuing another change. It works differently than asynchronous.
Right.
All right. I don't know if you're going to have that same or similar problem with doing scheduled actions as an asynchronous call for Flow.
Yeah, it depends on if you can call another process builder or a Flow as a scheduled action, which I don't know that you can.
But there are other limits out there. There's only so many scheduled actions that you can have out there at any given time, and there's only so many that are going to go and run every hour. I think the number is pretty high. I want to say something like 2,000.
Mm.
But if you're a really heavy utilizer of this, or you have a whole bunch of other scheduled actions like, hey, wait 90 days before the close or after the close date to send the thank you email, or whatever the case may be, those can add up very, very quickly for a medium to a large enterprise company. So you really only want to use it when you absolutely need to use it.
Right. So this request then to allow this asynchronicity, theoretically, it still would hit the same. If it weren't the solution we already have, if it were like a more implemented, more baked out solution, it would still potentially have these troubles.
Maybe. I mean, what would be really cool if someone built a AppExchange product that was a plugin, Apex plugin that let you launch flows through the Qubel interface. So you can have a Qubel Apex out there that lets you pass it and say, hey, and blah, 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 queue this change, and then that change is updating or running the flow, right? Because you can have Apex plugins, you can have Apex call flow. Theoretically, it's feasible. Yep,
that's true. I mean, you're still going to hit flow limits and things like that.
Right, which you would hit regardless if you're running the flow immediately or asynchronously.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that about covers our list for the day.
Which means...
Well, hang on. Now, we do these, what'd you say, once or twice a year?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just because we're not going to do one of these again for another 6 months does not mean that you should feel like you can't submit it. In fact, we went out and we found a few because we didn't have quite enough submissions. So please, if you have an idea and you're like, oh, I should have submitted it, go ahead and do it, because we do keep a record of everything that's submitted any time of the year. And the next time we do this, we're going to pull up that list and we're going to read off.
And if we get a huge influx, we might do one earlier.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Now, Brian, you can fade to black.
WizardCast is produced by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, directed by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, technical administration by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, script writing by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, audio editing by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, but mainly Mark, and website maintenance by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, but mainly Brian. And our intern this episode was Stephanie Boggs.
And you can be an intern too. Just follow us at WizardCast_pod on Twitter.
Or come up to us during events and then tweet the photo or whatever it is someplace on one of our social media pages so we remember to add you to the list.
If you have a joke, interview suggestion, or other comments that you'd like to send to us, then please do. You can call and leave a voice recording at 608-492-0321 or email wizardcast@thewizardnews.com.
And we need to hear from you. If you could ask Parker Harris one question, what would it be?
Submit a question by going to bit.ly/ParkerQuestions and fill out our short form.
And eventually, we're going to do another one of these, as Mark says, which is an idea exchange highlight. We just talked about this. Mark, what is the link for people to submit an idea?
bit.ly/idea highlight, all lowercase.
Don't forget to subscribe to the WizardCast and receive our next episode automagically.
And please post reviews on Apple Podcasts, aka iTunes, and share this episode. It helps others to hear what you just had to endure.
Once again, I'm Brian.
And I'm Brian, I'm going to run upstairs real quick because I'm starting to feel that cheese coming back on me.
Thanks for listening. Don't listen to that. Oh, God, no, don't listen to that.
And by the way, everybody, just in case you weren't sure, the cheese thing, yeah. Happy late April Fools.
Thank you, Mike Gerhardt, for giving us the idea. It was a fondue idea.
We are really fools, aren't we, Brian?
Yeah, I'm really sad that I can't think of any more terrible cheese puns.
We can't do these too often, Brian, or it'll just start getting cheesy.
Yeah, I mean, episodes just kind of melt together.
Yeah, and before you know it, it's not going to be our podcast. It will definitely be Nacho Podcast anymore.
I mean, we could end up doing that long string stretchy thing and just keep doing it.
Yeah, but then it's no longer very sharp.
Well, we'll just have to make it cheddar.
Yeah, well, we can try to make the podcast great again. Grating cheese.
Yeah, you're grating on my nerves. I mean,
Well, fine. If you got a
terrible.
problem with me, you can call the Fed Up Business Bureau.
You Googled cheese puns, didn't you?